We now commence session 2 after an extremely interesting session 1. The theme of session 2 is the technological revolution, a seminal challenge. This session will essentially analyze the way technological revolution is influencing land warfare. May I request the chairperson, Lieutenant General Rajesh Pant, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, and the esteemed panelists for the session to come and take their seats on the dais, please. Brigadier Simon Goldstein, MBE, ADC, British Army. Ms. Sharon Weinberger, Global Fellow, Woodrow Wilson Center, USA. Group Captain Ajay Lele, MP, IDSA. Lieutenant Colonel PJ Anand Kumar, CTO, Datawell Analytics. The bio of the esteemed chair is as flashed on the screen. I'll now request the chairperson to commence the session with his opening remarks.
Thank you, Colonel Rawat, and good afternoon to all ladies and gentlemen. I hope this session is as interesting as the first one. At the outset, let me thank General Ahluwalia and Team Claus for having me here. The only ending takeover note I've got is to stick to the time. So we have an hour and a half and 4 speakers, so it's 20 minutes each. And then we have a Q&A of about 10 minutes. We have an excellent panel of speakers in this session. And as I see, we are touching information warfare, we are touching cyber warfare, space, and AI and robotics. Considering that this is an international seminar, I thought let me take a change from graduating from tactical to operational to strategic to the global dimension, which is something that some of you may not be aware of. So I'll just share a couple of latest status updates on why is it that information warfare is raging on, if I may say unabashedly, and why is cyber warfare taking place as we speak. And there are basically 4 or 5 very important reasons for it. And the first one is the international scenario, the fault lines that are developing. And as late as Saturday in the last weekend, the meeting of the 6th UNGGE was completed. The UNGGE is a UN group of government experts. It is a group of 25 countries, India is one of them, and it took place in Geneva, where the talks almost collapsed because there were 2 clear divisions. There was the Russian and the Chinese and the Mexican and the Cuban lobby, which wanted something, and there was the Western Europe and the American lobby, which gave another idea as to how the things should be governed. Now the problem taking place is that firstly, so far we were thinking that international laws apply to cyberspace and there is the international humanitarian law, etc. But the Russians sprang a surprise last week when they said that the international humanitarian law applies to conflict situations, and cyber war is conducted in peacetime situations also. So that is the first problem area that they highlighted. The second one, of course, is known to us in the last few meetings also, that the root servers of the internet, the root servers are what controls the TL, the top level domains, the last part of your IP address. Out of the 13 root servers, 11 are in the US, 1 is in Europe, and 1 is in Japan. So the US side is pretty comfortable with the status quo, because if you have control over the US, over the root servers, it translates into information, and information translates into intelligence. But the other side is definitely not happy with it, and they are wanting a UN-led sort of a internet governance, a multi-stakeholder, multilateral sort of a governance. So these fault lines have now come out in the open, split wide open. The internet is being called as the splinternet. The balkanization of the internet, various words are being used. So this is the first scenario that is developing. That internationally, there is today no coordination as far as the governance of the internet is concerned, and this is what is being taken advantage of by the other community that is doing all these aspects. The second aspect is the lack of attribution. So attribution, as you're aware, is in trying to trace as to where the attacks are coming from. And just for information, we have a National Informatics Center here in Delhi, and if you go to any national level SOC or a NOC, they've got a huge global map in front of you where they show you from where the attacks are supposedly coming. And if you go to the NIC center, you find the attacks are mostly coming from the US. 40% of the attacks it displays are coming from the US, whereas the situation is entirely different. They're not coming from the US because what it displays is only the last IP address. The last IP address. And how the attacks are conducted is also to be understood, that they hire a server somewhere, they hire a VPN somewhere, they go through 5-6 hops, they go inside the darknet and come out. So traceability is becoming one of the most difficult things today. It's next to impossible actually. So the other side, the criminals are taking advantage of the lack of attribution. The third major aspect is of course the international regulations. We discuss this by the day, and we are aware of what is the Budapest Convention, the Tallinn Manual, the Paris Call for Trust, Vienna OEDC, and Prague proposals, everything. There is just no understanding as to what is the minimum threshold when you will call it a cyber war, what is a cyber crime, what is a cyber weapons. The basic definitions are being questioned. So this is the third major aspect which is creating these fault lines on the internet. I also mentioned the dark web, and I'm glad that most of you are not aware as to what happens in the dark web, but for those of us who have to monitor it as a business, all I can say is that all the wrong thing that you can imagine happen there. After you go through the entry Tor node and you go through the relay nodes, you find the drugs are being sold, the weapons are being sold, state secrets are being sold, your cards, debit, credit cards are being sold. Anything wrong that you can think of happens there. And the exchange of money is taking place in cryptocurrency. So this is the status of the dark web, the international scenario. And lastly, of course, is the aspect of cyber deterrence, which also you should be aware of as to how the cyber attacks are conducted. What is understood by cyber deterrence? It is not like a nuclear deterrence, that you have a nuclear weapon, you demonstrate the power within your own national boundary, and you show that you have nuclear deterrence. In cyber, you have to be sitting there on the other side. That is why it is called persistent presence. So all the 8 stages of the attack, maybe you have to go through the first 6 stages. And having done that, you have to be there. And that is what is going to deter the other party not to attack you, because he knows that if he does something, then there'll be a reaction. So these are the international, the global sort of aspects I thought I must cover to this audience to just explain to you as to what is the international scenario at the moment, and why the information warfare is being conducted in such a raging manner. Why is every day cyber attacks, we get about 1 million hits a month or something, the indicators of compromise, etc. India is the second most attacked country in the world as far as cyber attacks are concerned. It is because of all these aspects that I mentioned, that the international scenario is very bleak, the attribution is difficult, the norms, there are 11 norms that have been decided in the United Nations. They're very idealistic norms, all of them. They say that you don't attack. If there is an attack, we will share information. They are non-binding norms. Nobody follows them. So it's a very dark and serious situation, but I don't want to paint a gloomy picture, because we must have the brighter side of things and hear the experts on our panel. And on that note,